All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Katherine with Free Tours by Foot, and I'm coming to you live today for a walk across the Brooklyn Bridge. So hopefully I have some of you joining me. We have a beautiful day here in New York City. A little bit cold, but a beautiful, clear, sunny day. So that should mean that we have absolutely beautiful views going across the Brooklyn Bridge. We're gonna have a lot of things to see, and I'm really excited to get started here in just a moment. So thank you so much for joining me wherever you are. We're going to be taking a stroll across the beautiful, iconic Brooklyn Bridge today. And for this walk, we're actually going to be starting on the Brooklyn side of the bridge. Of course, you can start on either side, Brooklyn or Manhattan. But personally, I love starting on the Brooklyn side. I think that you get such spectacular views of the lower Manhattan skyline that, of course, you can get those views either direction. You just have to turn around a little bit more if you're starting on the Manhattan side. So we're going to start on the Brooklyn side. We are right here by Cadman Plaza, and there is a great entrance to the Brooklyn Bridge just a few steps in front of me. So I'm going to show you. I see somebody's joining us. Hello from Germany. Hello, thank you for joining us. Give me 1 second to turn the camera around and we will get started. So here you go, Brooklyn Bridge Walkway right here. So we're actually underneath the Brooklyn Bridge, but there is a staircase. There are a couple different ways to get on the Brooklyn Bridge from the Brooklyn side. This is just my favorite way. So here's the stairs right over here to the left, but here we are, Brooklyn Bridge right here. So we are going to head up the stairs and start our walk. So I'm so excited to have you all join me today for this walk across the Brooklyn Bridge. This is one of my favorite spots in New York City. I think the Brooklyn Bridge is just so beautiful. And if you get into the history a little bit, which we're certainly going to do on this walk, so impressive what was able to be built here. There it is. First look at the Brooklyn Bridge. Don't worry, we're gonna get lots of great views as we go. So the Brooklyn Bridge was finished in 1883, connecting the cities of New York and Brooklyn. When this bridge was finished, New York and Brooklyn were still separate cities. We had not yet consolidated to become the 5-borough city of New York, with New York, Brooklyn, Queens, the Bronx, and Staten Island. So this bridge was actually constructed between 1869 and 1883. So all total, took 14 years to build this bridge. And looking at it today, I mean, I think it's impressive, but nothing compared with how impressive it would have been in its time. This was considered one of the engineering achievements of the century when they built the Brooklyn Bridge. The idea of needing a bridge between the cities of New York and Brooklyn really came about because by the middle of the 1800s, actually a lot of people were starting to commute in between the two cities, in between New York and Brooklyn. And the only way to do that with no Brooklyn Bridge was by ferry boat. There were steamship ferries that ran back and forth across the East River, which was certainly better than not having any option at all. But by the 1850s, there were so many people making that commute back and forth. They were running over 1,000 ferry trips every single day. And the ferries could be crowded, there could be delays, and there could be weather issues. If there was rain, snow, sleet, fog, it's not unusual for there to be massive delays or no ferry service at all. And then people couldn't make their commutes back and forth. So the idea of a bridge between the two cities came about. It wasn't as simple as it sounds, though. There were a lot of factors to consider in what kind of bridge was going to work here, how they were going to be able to do this. Because both New York and Brooklyn were major seaports, it was decided that, whatever was going to be built here across this stretch could not really disrupt the water traffic. You were going to need to keep most of the river clear, high enough clearance for a ship to pass underneath. So really a suspension bridge was going to be the best option available. The problem was that this span across the East River was going to be about 50% longer than the longest suspension bridge in the entire world. So this was definitely going to take a very savvy feat of engineering. It was going to take some creativity. It was going to take a lot of work. So they ended up hiring a German-born engineer, John Augustus Robling, to design the Brooklyn Bridge. He worked on it for a couple of years. They didn't just start construction right away in 1869. There were a lot of trials and tribulations that went into building the Brooklyn Bridge, starting with John Robling. And I'll talk about that in just a moment, but I do want to give you a quick view here of where we are. So you of course can see the bridge. You can start to see lower Manhattan ahead. Don't worry, we'll take a minute to do lots more views. But looking out this way, you can see back to where we started. That's Cadman Plaza, those trees up ahead. That's right where I started and picked up this path. Over this direction, you can look over into Brooklyn Heights. And then over here, you can look into Dumbo. Over there on my right. Dumbo stands for Down Under the Manhattan Bridge Overpass, the neighborhood that lies just to the right of the Brooklyn Bridge if you're walking from Brooklyn. So John Robling is obviously very closely associated with the Brooklyn Bridge. Building this bridge was considered one of the crowning achievements of his entire career, but he didn't actually live to see construction even started on the Brooklyn Bridge. About a month before construction was meant to begin, he was doing a final survey for the bridge over on the Brooklyn side of the river, and he had his foot crushed against a pier by an incoming ferry. This led to a surgery to amputate some of his toes, and he ended up going home. He said he preferred to do his own follow-up post-operative care using water therapy, and that he would treat himself at home. He ended up dying of a tetanus infection just a few weeks later. So he never lived to see this monumental accomplishment, the Brooklyn Bridge. I can see somebody joining us, Jojo. I hope you can join us for this tour in July. Please do. It's such a beautiful bridge, and there's so much to see and so much to know about this tour. Thanks for joining us today. So with John Robling no longer a part of the project, the position of chief engineer for the Brooklyn Bridge passed to his son, Washington Robling, who had worked with his father on several projects before. So he took over here on the Brooklyn Bridge for a little less than a year here on the bridge site. We'll talk about why in just a moment, but I do want to stop and give you another look over here to the side. Right over there to the right is the Manhattan Bridge. We actually have a couple of bridges right in a row here on this lower stretch of the East River. You'll be able to see the next one in just a moment, but that's the Manhattan Bridge just directly to the side. We have somebody joining us from Minnesota. We hope you can come and walk across the bridge with us in December. It is absolutely worth it at any time of year. Make sure you bundle up if you're coming in the winter. It can get a little breezy, but still beautiful and still worth doing. So one of the big challenges with getting this construction really moving along is if you see these giant stone towers, we have two of these stone towers, their foundations are actually underwater in the East River. And so in order to lay the foundations for these giant granite stone towers, they needed to excavate the riverbed underwater. And to do that, they were using something called caissons. If you're not familiar with what a caisson is, picture a big wooden box that's open on the bottom side only. It works the same way. If you've ever held a bucket upside down in water and kept pressure on, you can keep water out. That's basically how a caisson worked here. So these would be pinned down to the riverbed, held down by big blocks of granite with pressurized air pumped into the caisson to keep the water and the debris out. And then workers would go down into the caisson and start excavating out the riverbed. So these days, you would start to recognize a lot of the symptoms people started developing very, very quickly. Here on the bridge site, they had people suffering from a wide array of symptoms that today we would recognize as decompression sickness or the bends, diver's disease. You see it in scuba divers. In the 1870s, they called this Caissons disease. And of all of the people working, and I just had somebody tell me, Caisson is a box in French. Oh, that's really interesting. That makes a lot of sense. I actually didn't know that. So as they had all of these people coming in and out of these pressurized air caissons all day long, they were getting sick. Over 100 people working on the Brooklyn Bridge had some form of Caissons disease, including Washington Robling, who had just taken over as chief engineer from his father. And in his case, he became partially paralyzed and he was bedridden. Part of the job as chief engineer in that time was to be here on site to supervise the day-to-day work on the bridge. And he was bedridden and unable to perform that task. So his wife Emily stepped in, and Emily Warren Robling, for over 13 years, worked here on the Brooklyn Bridge site, doing the day-to-day job of the chief engineer. I have somebody's chiming in from Germany saying John Robling is from my hometown in Germany. And that was where he was both born and where he studied, where he trained, and then moved here to New York, to the United States as an adult. So we're up here by the tower now. You can see right up there on that main plaque under engineers, John Robling, Washington A. Robling, and then you have a lot of names underneath them because of course they were not just two people working on the Brooklyn Bridge. But when Washington Robling was stricken with Caissons disease, he actually ended up supervising from a window. He and his wife Emily lived over in Brooklyn Heights, which is the neighborhood that you can see just over that direction, and he watched the work that was going on with a telescope from the window. So over here on the other side of the Brooklyn Tower, you can see this plaque here. This says, "The builders of the bridge, dedicated to the memory of Emily Warren Robling, whose faith and courage helped her stricken husband, Colonel Washington A. Robling, complete the construction of this bridge from the plans of his father, John A. Robling, who gave his life to the bridge." And it says, "Back of every great work, we can find the self-sacrificing devotion of a woman." But you can also see that this tablet was put in by the Brooklyn Engineers Club not until 1951, though, which is significantly after the Brooklyn Bridge was completed. Even though Emily was here on the bridge site nearly every single day and had taken on a lot of the day-to-day on-site responsibilities of the chief engineer, her contribution wasn't as widely recognized in her lifetime. The idea of a woman running a lot of the day-to-day responsibilities here on the Brooklyn Bridge site actually would have been quite controversial at the time. But Emily Robling, whose name you just saw on the Brooklyn Tower here, was actually the first person to cross the Brooklyn Bridge. So on opening day, which was May of 1883, Emily was the first person to cross the Brooklyn Bridge, of an acknowledgement of the contributions of the whole Robling family, not just Emily. She crossed the bridge in a carriage holding a live rooster as a symbol of victory. The opening day of the Brooklyn Bridge was a really, really big deal. This bridge was very long awaited. It was obviously desperately needed for some of the reasons we talked about earlier. And there was a lot of pomp and circumstance. The President of the United States was here, the Governor of New York was here, the mayors of both cities of New York and Brooklyn were here. Emily was crossing, holding a rooster. There was a lot of excitement going on. And people in New York were really excited to finally get on this bridge that they had watched being constructed for 14 years. And in the very first 24 hours that the bridge was open to the public, 150,000 people, give or take, crossed the bridge on foot. So when you come and visit and you walk the Brooklyn Bridge, it may be very, very crowded, but it probably won't be 150,000 people in 24 hours crowded like it was on that opening day. So I want to stop and turn around for a second, give you another look at one of those iconic towers of the Brooklyn Bridge. They're made out of granite, and the design of it with these beautiful arched openings near the top. The design of the towers themselves were inspired by the windows of Gothic cathedrals. That was what it was meant to evoke. I'm going to keep walking across the Brooklyn Bridge here. In case you were curious, the full walk across the Brooklyn Bridge is just over a mile, 1.1 miles or 1.6 kilometers. So walking across takes about a half hour, give or take. Depends on how often you stop to take pictures. So I want to also talk for just a moment about these other bridges that you can see out to the side. So if you're walking from Brooklyn across the Brooklyn Bridge, these will be off on your right. So you can see the Manhattan Bridge just over there. And then in the distance though, there is another bridge as the river curves around. That's the Williamsburg Bridge. Williamsburg Bridge connects Williamsburg, Brooklyn with the Lower East Side of Manhattan. Both of those bridges, by the way, are longer than the Brooklyn Bridge. One of the reasons the Brooklyn Bridge was placed where it was is that this was the shortest span across this stretch of the East River. I guess if you're already breaking a span record, why do extra work? We're getting to one of my favorite stretches of the bridge. So right here on this center span, all of the cables are back underneath the pedestrian deck, and you get an absolutely spectacular view. I'm actually going to go pop up on this bench right over here. Hopefully I won't get in trouble, but I'm going to stand up here because you can get an absolutely amazing view. So I'm going to show you the full 360 from up here, and then we'll do it again and I'll show you what it is we're looking at. But it's pretty spectacular up here. By far, I think one of the best views in New York City. So out there, you can see a small island that's closest to us. That's Governor's Island. Governor's Island got its name because when New York was a British colony, that was for the personal use of the Royal Governor of New York. Governor's Island, following the American Revolution, was used as a military base all the way up until the 1990s. But then it was sold to the city of New York in 2003 for $1. And now you can go over there and rent a bike and bike around, and there's all kinds of events and festivals over there. Thank you, Jen, for saying impressive views. I think so too. I mean, I didn't create them, but I can appreciate them and think they're beautiful. So all the way back there, you can see the land in the distance. That's Staten Island. So that's one of the 5 boroughs of New York. Very, very tiny out there in the harbor, but you can see the Statue of Liberty out there. And then if you look into Lower Manhattan, you get this great view of the Lower Manhattan skyline. Of course, the tallest of the buildings that you can see is One World Trade Center, right there with the big spire on it. But over to the left, the building with the pointy green roof is 40 Wall Street. Had the distinction of being the tallest building in the world for just a few days before the Chrysler Building put its spire up on the roof. And the other tall building with the steel spire on the top is on Pine Street, and that was formerly the headquarters of AIG. If you look out the other direction, you can see into Midtown. So you can see the Empire State Building, you can see the Chrysler Building further to the right. It's really just such a gorgeous spot here in the middle of the bridge. Now, if you look back this way, over there, on the land, just by the Manhattan Bridge, that's Dumbo. You can see the building with the clock tower. That's a part of Dumbo. And then over here, you can see towards Brooklyn Heights. You can see Brooklyn Bridge Park. So if you're here on a nice day and you want a spot to stop and hang out a little bit partway across the bridge, highly, highly recommend. If you want great pictures, stand on the bench like I just did. So we'll keep we'll continue our walk across the bridge. Now I walk up here and I think relaxing, nice views, fresh air. It did not take long for people to see the Brooklyn Bridge and think opportunity for a daredevil stunt. Thank you, Laura, for joining us from Wales. Glad you could be here today. So just a couple of years after the Brooklyn Bridge opened, we had our first person attempt a daredevil jump off of the Brooklyn Bridge. His name was Robert Odlum. He was a swimming instructor, and he was unfortunately killed while trying to do this. And then just about a year later, the next person tried, named Steve Brody. There are all kinds of stories as to why Steve Brody was doing this, what the point of it was. Some people say he just wanted the publicity. Some people say he was trying to win a bet that he had placed on himself because he wanted to open a tavern. Either way, he made this jump and he immediately became famous. Hi, Martin from Canada. Glad you could join us as well. Thanks for being here. So Steve Brody made this jump off of the Brooklyn Bridge, and actually there's still speculation to this day as to whether or not he even did it. Some people say he just threw a dummy off of the bridge and then popped out of a rowboat, but either way, he did become famous. He had a tavern in Lower Manhattan that was also a museum to his spectacular feat. I just want to stop here because actually from here you can get a good view of these suspension cables. As we get closer to the towers, they're much higher up, and so I think it's harder to get a really good gauge of exactly how big they are. So here's my hand, I guess, for some perspective. These are pretty massive cables, and we'll talk a little bit more about them in just a moment. Hey everyone that just chimed in, I'm glad you could join us. I see people from the UK, from Canada, Wales. This is really exciting. I'm so glad people could come and join us today. So I guess you really had two sides of the coin. Oh yes, I am bundled up to the person who just asked. It's very chilly today, but I have many, many layers of clothing on. There were really two sides of the coin. You had the Steve Brodys, I guess, who were seeing this as an opportunity for this like death-defying stunt. But then you really had a lot of people who were kind of nervous about the idea of walking on the Brooklyn Bridge, you know, and this was definitely exacerbated by an incident that happened just 1 week after the bridge opened, so May of 1883, and it was a beautiful sunny Sunday afternoon. Lots of people were out enjoying the walk across the bridge, and someone screamed. They screamed because they tripped. But other people heard this scream. Somebody yelled out, "The bridge is collapsing." People went running for the exits. Multiple people were crushed to death in the stampede that happened. And, you know, after that, a lot of people didn't want to walk on the Brooklyn Bridge, even though, you know, the bridge wasn't actually collapsing. They weren't really in any danger from that. The stampede was certainly dangerous. But a lot of people had a lot of fears about the Brooklyn Bridge, especially after that. But about 1 year after this happened, P.T. Barnum came to town with the circuits, and he paraded 21 elephants across the Brooklyn Bridge, led by the famous elephant Jumbo. And this really calmed people's fears. They saw these giant elephants walking across the Brooklyn Bridge and thought, okay, it must be all right. It must be all right for me. So I always love to think about that when I'm up here. I just look out at the bridge here and I just try to picture elephants walking across the Brooklyn Bridge, and it's such an amazing thought. So something also about where we are right now, and I'll turn around and give you another look here at this pedestrian deck. It's actually one of the questions I get the most when I'm leading tour groups across the Brooklyn Bridge, is we're walking up here on this fantastic pedestrian deck that's elevated in the center of the bridge, and people always assume that this was a later addition to the Brooklyn Bridge. This was a modern addition, this pedestrian deck. This is the original design of the bridge. It was considered a really big deal. I mean, the idea of having this elevated pedestrian deck, it was one of the first bridges in the world to have this design, and it is really, really wonderful. So I'm walking under some scaffolding right now, and you can see that there is a little bit up on the Brooklyn Bridge. There's just some kind of routine maintenance that's been going on the Brooklyn Bridge recently. Happens every few years or so. Got to keep the bridge ready to go, ready for all of us to walk across it. But fortunately, not too much blocking the view. So I want to talk for just a moment about the cables of the Brooklyn Bridge, because they're such an iconic part of the look of the Brooklyn Bridge, first of all, but of course they're also very, very important structurally. So when we say suspension cables, we're talking about the two right down the middle that you can see, and then the big cable down the right and down the left. So these suspension cables are made up of very, very thin individual steel wires, over 5,000 wires per cable. So I'll try to give you a close-up of one of these smaller ones here so you can actually see the individual strands there. So you have the suspension cables up there, and because they were so large and so heavy in that time period when the bridge was being constructed, they actually had to be assembled right here on the bridge site. And the process was one wire at a time. They would use a traveler rope to bring a wire from anchor to anchor across the bridge. And then they had a worker that would travel along these wires, spinning these cables together, binding them together. So it took a year and a half just to do those 4 cables. So here's another look. Now we're on the Manhattan side tower, but all of these cables also crisscrossing down here to the deck. So just so you know how much steel wire is in this bridge, it's just such an insane amount. If we were to, for some reason, unravel the entire Brooklyn Bridge and lay every single wire out end to end, we could go from here to the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco and then back, and then do the entire trip one more time. So it is an absolutely enormous amount of wire that went into this bridge. And also something that was really noteworthy at the time is all of the wires and all of this support that you can see along the side, this truss, this is all done with steel. That was considered a pretty groundbreaking thing to be doing in the 1860s when they were planning the Brooklyn Bridge. It was really only very recently at that point that they had figured out how to make steel in a cost-effective way. And so the idea of using steel was actually seen as pretty risky. But John Robling was a very early and enthusiastic supporter of steel construction. He said steel was the metal of the future, and convinced the cities building this bridge that this was the right option, as opposed to the more standard methods of construction, which involved a rope. So hopefully you're enjoying this walk across the Brooklyn Bridge. I'm so glad I have some people that have joined me today, have some company as I walk across. We're gonna have more of these coming up. Keep an eye out for more live walks that we're going to be doing in all parts of New York City, and I hope you can join me for those as well. So now you can start to see a little bit more as we get further in, closer to lower Manhattan. You can see some of these buildings a little bit better. This one I didn't point out earlier, but the wavy building that's in front of us was designed by Frank Gehry. It's an apartment building. It was designed by Frank Gehry. It is a really beautiful, eye-catching building. I love it. It's one of my favorites. Thanks again to everyone who has joined us. Thank you to people who contributed, who sent stars today or made any contributions via YouTube. We really, really appreciate it. So I'm going to take a quick stop right here. The building you can see up ahead and on the right that has kind of that tiered shape to it. That's called the Municipal Building. It's a city government building. Our actual City Hall building is in Lower Manhattan. It's actually straight ahead, but it's pretty tiny. And after the cities consolidated, we became the 5-borough city of New York. We needed little more room for our city government. So this building was started, some people call it the wedding cake building, and some of that is the shape of it. It does look kind of like a wedding cake at the top. But also for many, many years, if you got married at City Hall, i.e. by the city clerk, it was inside this building. So there were actual weddings that took place here. So as you get out over the land here on the side, oh, hello from Mexico. I just see somebody joined us. So we're out over Manhattan now. And so structurally, where we are, what we're walking over, is part of the anchor of the Brooklyn Bridge. So the structural support of this bridge is from these massive suspension cables that go across the river, and they're anchored into place inside these giant structures. Each anchor is about 60,000 tons of granite, so very, very large. The anchors have had some interesting use over the years. You know, they were displacing a lot of businesses here on the Manhattan side and the Brooklyn side in order to clear the way to build the anchor. I see somebody joined us from Indonesia. Thank you so much for joining us. And it is a beautiful day. It's just a little chilly today. So these anchors over here, actually both anchors, Manhattan and Brooklyn, had wine vaults created inside them, because on both sides of the river, Brooklyn and Manhattan, there had been wine distribution merchants that had been displaced from the area in order to clear the way for the anchors. And it sounds crazy to be storing wine inside the anchors to the Brooklyn Bridge, but these anchors are dark, they're cool, they're an even temperature all year round. And so they actually were a really good place to store wine, and so they could rent out space in these wine vaults. It was actually a way of bringing in a little income while the Brooklyn Bridge was being constructed, because construction costs were running very, very high. And so yes, there were wine vaults inside the anchors to the Brooklyn Bridge, as crazy as that sounds. I'll say thanks so much for joining us from Poland. I see somebody joining us from Poland. It's so exciting to have all of these people from all over the world joining us for this walk today, this walk across the Brooklyn Bridge. We do have such a beautiful day for it. So now that we're getting a little closer into lower Manhattan, see there's that Gary building a little closer up. And then past that, you can see One World Trade Center. The tallest of the new World Trade Center buildings. One World Trade Center is 1,776 feet tall, and that is to commemorate 1776, the year the United States declared independence. The building that's very ornate looking with the pointy green top is the Woolworth Tower. That was the tallest building in the entire world when it was finished in 1913. I know it's not even close to being the tallest building in lower Manhattan now, but it was a very tall building when it was finished originally. It was also noteworthy because it was fully wired for electricity. Again, I know that doesn't sound like the biggest deal today in 2022, but in that time period, it was considered extremely impressive. And I still think architecturally, it's one of the most beautiful buildings in lower Manhattan. I just absolutely love the Woolworth Tower. Here's a better look here at the Municipal Building, or the Wedding Cake Building over here on the right. And so if you make this walk across the Brooklyn Bridge and you end on the Manhattan side, you're in a really great location. First of all, you're quite near several subway options if you needed to get on a subway, but also you are such a short walk to the World Trade Center, to Wall Street, where I led a live walk last week. It's really a great area to go and see a lot. You're just a short walk from Battery Park. If you wanted to go hop on the Staten Island Ferry, lower Manhattan is just absolutely jam-packed with things to see. So it's a great thing to do after taking a walk across the Brooklyn Bridge. And I hope everybody that joined us today can visit us in person sometime. I hope that you can come and take this walk with us again, and do it in person. When we do this as a tour, we walk across the Brooklyn Bridge and see both the neighborhoods of Dumbo and Brooklyn Heights. So there's a lot to see on the Brooklyn side of the bridge as well. Hello from Germany, who just joined us. Thank you so much for everybody who came and listened today. If you didn't get a chance to join me last Tuesday when I walked down Wall Street, that video is still available. Take a walk down Wall Street, which is really, really close to where I am right now. So when you visit in person, you can go do both of those right in the same trip. Hello from Canada, Rock from Canada. So you can see as you get towards the ends of the bridge, lots of vendors out. This is a very, very popular tourist destination, and so there are almost always a lot of vendors. Now, something I do want to point out, when you walk across the bridge today, there's actually still signs here on the sidewalk that have an icon for a bicycle, but those are now outdated starting just at the end of 2021. They actually moved the bike lane for the Brooklyn Bridge down to the lower level of the bridge. So that entire path that I was on is now just pedestrian. So you have a little bit more room and you can actually go to both sides of the deck in order to take pictures. So exiting off the bridge here. Ooh, I think I can catch this light right here if I hustle just a little bit. But in addition to the walk I did on Wall Street last week, we have a lot of other videos that were not live tours, but are virtual tours that you could take. We have tours of Central Park, of Midtown Manhattan, lots of different areas. So if you're not able to join us in person in New York City right now, just know that you can join us virtually still. We have a lot of content that you can enjoy. So thank you so, so much. So thank you, everybody. I'm gonna get my camera turned around. There we go. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much. Glad you could join us from Orlando, especially if you are from Brooklyn or missing Brooklyn. But thank you everybody for coming and joining me today. I really, really appreciate it. Hopefully you enjoyed this walk across the Brooklyn Bridge. Stay tuned. We will do more of these live walks coming up. Go back and watch some of the others if you haven't had a chance to yet. I hope you all can join me here live in person in New York very, very soon. But until then, I will see you here on these virtual walks. Thank you all so much and have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye.